Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nima Abouardi and we're in Old Town. Well, actually, it's one of the newer parts of the city. And this week, much like the architecture here, we're taking a look at one of the region's age-old industries, the making of the perfume oud, and how it's taking on a new twist. Also coming up on the programme.
I'm here in the ancient city of Baalbek in Lebanon, which is home to the oldest music festival in the Middle East. It's certainly a concert venue with a difference among these ruins, but is that enough to pull in the crowds and the international stars?
Testing their mettle, will expansion by Bahrain's Alba leave the region drowning in too much aluminium? And life after the recession, we ask Lebanon's former finance minister how the Middle East should coordinate recovery. But first, the city of Baalbek in Lebanon is home to some of the Middle East's best preserved Roman ruins. And every summer they come alive as thousands throng to see the music festival that's held there. But at a time when Gulf states can afford to pay big bucks to attract international stars to their festivals, can Baalbek compete? Well, Katie Watson went there to find out.
These performers are putting the final touches to their dance routine, ready for the opening night of Lebanon's oldest festival. With just a few hours left, there's lots to get done before the show begins. Baalbek Festival has a long history. It was started in the 1950s by a president who had a big interest in the country's heritage. He wanted to attract tourists to see the city's ruins.
President Chamoun wanted to do something for the Acropolis of Baalbek, because the Acropolis of Baalbek was very far from Europe and the Arab countries, and the region of Baalbek was very poor.
In Lebanon, politics is never far away. Baalbek is the administrative headquarters of the Shia Muslim movement Hezbollah. In 2006, the concert was stopped as war broke out between Israel and Hezbollah. And that wasn't the first time. The civil war stopped the festival for 15 years, and that's affected the festival's history. But it's not just politics that has had an impact on the festival's survival. The financial downturn has also played a part.
Last year we have many sponsors and many partners, but this year we have none of them. And it's going to be very difficult if next year is going to be the same.
With no sponsorship, though, May says Baalbek can only last a few more years. It may have history, but Lebanon doesn't have the money like its oil-rich Gulf neighbours to pay for these festivals. Baalbek charges as much as $150 a ticket, and it also relies on government subsidies, which often paid very late, and makes it difficult for organisers to finance. As the sun starts to set and the audience arrives, financial worries are put aside for at least one night.
Over the next 6 weeks, these ruins will play host to a series of concerts ranging from classical music to jazz and pop. Organisers expect about 50,000 people to come to the concerts. The audience is mainly Lebanese, but there's a growing interest from international visitors too.
And the lineup this year is also international. Kicking off the event is pop star Mika.
Good evening, Baalbek. Masalhoor Baalbek.
Half Lebanese Mika may have set the organisers of Baalbek back quite a few dollars, but he's a strategic choice. He's helping bring a younger generation to Baalbek. And if the spontaneous pillow fight between him and the audience was anything to go by, the organisers made the right decision. But what does a big star like Mika want to play at Baalbek for when he can probably get bigger sums of money from most other places in the region?
There was always the mythology of Beirut, and one of the most important things was Baalbek and the summer festival. And so I always had this idea, that was the ultimate place to play, one of the ultimate places to play in the world, really. And it kind of is. It's an incredible place, and it has a lot of history. It's been going since the 50s, and so I came to choosing where I wanted to play this time, and there were a lot of different options, and the choice was obvious, really, for me.
But when the concert's over, the kit packed away and most of the fans have gone back to Beirut, what becomes of Baalbek? The morning after, the pillows on the stage are the only reminder of last night's fun, but there are plenty of tourists from Lebanon and abroad looking around the ruins. And according to the culture minister, it's these people who are important for Lebanon's economy.
37% of people coming to Lebanon are coming to cultural events. So if we're having 2,200,000 visitors, and we're expecting this year for Lebanon to host 37% of these will be coming for culture. That's how important culture is.
Despite this, Baalbek has several obstacles yet to overcome, but organisers are hoping that as long as the political scene remains quiet and it can pull in big sponsors once again, Baalbek will remain in the Middle East's cultural calendar for a few years yet.
Katie Watson enjoying the Baalbek festival there. Now, for centuries, the defining scent of the Gulf was the perfume oud, but its roots come from India, not the Middle East. Produced in tropical climes, this strong woody fragrance has to be imported, and these days a 10 ml bottle can cost up to $1,500. So how is it made and who's buying it? I went along to one family-owned firm to find out.
Oud starts with something called the timber. Okay, the timber is sitting over here. We get about 25 to 30 tons of it per year, which gets processed, and what is then converted to oud. It comes from countries like Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia. Now, within the timber, you chip away the parts that you can't really use, and then you get the actual piece that can either be burnt or be distilled to extract the oil from. The word perfume in Latin means perfume, from smoke. That was the absolute original form of fragrances.
So you're going to show us what happens with the timber, as you call
timber.
it, the pieces of wood.
Absolutely.
Let's go and see.
Sure.
What happens in here?
This is where all the oud processing happens. Now, first question, a lot of people think, what is oud? Oud basically is a fungus. The tree, agar tree, gets infected by this fungus, and the tree, to protect itself, actually excretes this kind of enzyme that envelopes this fungus, and it keeps growing. It doesn't know when to stop, but that enzyme actually forms the actual oud.
And so can you just tell me what these gentlemen here are doing?
Sure, you want to have a go? You can have a go. Let me show you. However, it takes years of practice. So as you can see, this is raw. It's not been processed yet. He's still working on it, okay? In contrast with the one that has been actually finished, yeah?
So this is all nicely filed down, nice and
filed
smooth.
down, it's smooth, and it's taken away most of these white bits, which when you burn, it's just going to smell like burning wood. Whereas what you really want to end up with is the parts where the concentration of the oil really darkens the part of the wood. This is where all the distillation of the oud oil happens. Okay, these sills, they are very, very traditional. We've tried, and I'm sure a lot of people in the trade have tried to modernize it. Unfortunately, it's a very rustic process. One of the reasons why it's so expensive and precious, because the yield is very low. If you boil, say for example, about a kilo, the yield is about 1 to 1.2 ml. The differentiation between each is primarily the origin of the oil, where it comes from. The quality of it is determined by the level of purity.
So say this sample here. It looks like what? A few mils of
well,
oil?
that bottle would be approximately 3 ml, give or take.
How much is this worth?
This would be about, say, 600 odd. Yeah.
600 dirhams.
Dirhams for 3 ml.
So just under $200.
Absolutely. The total value of this room is well over 20 million dirhams. Yeah. So this is our Fort Knox.
Just from there.
Just the oil. Just the oil, nothing else.
We've seen the wood, the oil, and the oil is not just sold as oil, is it? It's
Absolutely
also
not.
used in perfume. Can you just take us through that?
Sure.
Process.
Well, pure oil itself is also used as a perfume, like say rose or jasmine oil. But at the same time, it's also can be used as an ingredient which will be blended to create a fragrance, a perfume, if you like, completed
There
perfume.
has been a downturn. Consumers are spending less. You must have been affected.
Well, to be honest, the way the market slowed down was the biggest surprise. I mean, I'm sure everybody experienced it. We didn't expect it the way it happened. Say October 2008 onwards, it was like, wow, crash. But alhamdulillah, we've still managed to keep our figures intact. Fine, we have not seen the customary growth that we were used to, but we've done far better than a lot of, let's say, other retailers out there. This is where it all finally ends up. As I said, you know, this is a growing part of the business. So obviously this is where a lot of the focus is ending up as well.
So just going to say, where is this perfume going to be sold?
Across the globe, everywhere. Yes, absolutely. It's going to initially be launched in the GCC, and the export markets will take it on after that.
This is your own brand?
Absolutely.
And was everything made from scratch by you?
Absolutely, by us. Blended by our people, manufactured over here. Of course, the ingredients come from all over the world. You know, we can't produce the ingredients, but the blending, the formulation, everything is done over here.
Abdullah Ajmal explaining the intricacies of making oud to me. Now, as the Middle East emerges from the global recession, confidence is slowly creeping back into the markets here. But the oil-rich countries of the Gulf have fared very differently to their less wealthy neighbours. So is a joined-up approach really best? That's a question I put to Jihad Azur, Lebanon's former finance minister and senior advisor with Booz & Co.
I think the region was able to, weather the storm better than other parts of the world, not because of better policies, but because of lack of integration or limited integration into the global economy, which is now is positive news. It means that there is an opportunity for the region if reforms are, done at the right speed, and if the region is developing its comparative advantage to play a greater role. Therefore, we're at a crossroad. If governments are willing to do reform, revisit the way they do business, same also for ministers of finance, I think the region can catch up very quickly and strengthen its power internationally.
Do the governments of this region realize what is needed?
They do realize, but I think it's not enough because things are changing very quickly. What is happening currently in Europe is going to change the landscape of public finance management. The crisis is showing us where the problems are. The current thinking through the G20 and other forums is also leading the way for the new waves of reforms. It is important not to be lagging behind. Being a first in reform is also being the first in recovery.
How connected is this region? Should ministries of finance, for example, work together?
Yes, definitely. I think there is a need for greater cooperation regionally, because this is how they can create a market that will count. This is how Europe was created, is through regular coordination on technical issues, most of the time are economic or financial issues. And progressively, this is how a common market was created. And this is how various countries were protected. The lesson that we should have, that now it's our time to do it faster, to be ahead of the curve, and we all know what should be done, and to have the courage of doing it.
Lebanon's former finance minister Jihad Azur speaking to me earlier. Right, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, sink or swim? Has the region really learned any lessons from the financial crisis?
Confidence perhaps became a little bit of arrogance and hubris, and Dubai began to believe its own hype a little bit. So it just sailed too high and sailed a little bit too close to the sun.
Welcome back to the programme. I'm Nima Abu Warde. Now, in Bahrain in the 1960s, there was plenty of gas. And so the government there hit upon a clever idea to use it to make aluminium. Aluminium Bahrain was the first smelter to set up in the Gulf, and its success sparked interest from neighbouring countries like Qatar and Dubai and Abu Dhabi here in the UAE. It's expected that by 2020, the production of aluminium in the Gulf will quadruple to 12% of global output. But can the old compete with the new? Well, Philip Hampshire went to Manama, the capital of Bahrain, to find out.
Since 1968, the furnace fires of Aluminium Bahrain have been burning. It marries cheap local natural gas with imported bauxite to add value by making aluminium. The model's been so successful that now nearly everyone else in the Gulf, from Saudi Arabia to Qatar, has founded a rival company. So will there be too much of the metal in the region?
I think if you talk about overcapacity, you have to think about the world demand. You see, aluminium, although we have half our production is sold in Bahrain, another 15% in the GCC. Our market is the whole world. Our expectation, our consultant estimate is that in 3 years' time, there will be a shortage of supply and the demand will exceed the supply of aluminium.
Aluminium's used in everything from aeroplanes to car bodies to even construction and, of course, soft drink cans. That's because it's light and quite cheap. But even as the world invests in yet more infrastructure and, of course, even more soft drinks, all of this still means that there may not be enough demand out there in the Middle East for Alba's products. Just down the road is the headquarters of one of Alba's biggest customers, Garmco. Garmco is an aluminium rolling mill. The two companies were founded as sister businesses around the same time. Garmco currently buys 100% of the aluminium it uses from Alba, but as the chief executive explains, that's all about to change. But Garmco sources all of its aluminium from just one supplier, Alba. Does that not hurt your business model?
We thought about this. For years we've been a one supplier company, and that is not good. And our board have directed us to think about other sources. Alba has to also to operate within a competitive environment, and with all these smelters coming up in the GCC countries like in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, all of these smelters are operating and they will compete with each other.
For a company like Alba, the threat of losing such a big customer is a serious one.
I'm confident with the expansion we'll be able to give them all the metal they need. Still, being close to the smelter gives us a huge advantage of giving them the product at a much lower price, because the cost of shipping and logistics is a lot of saving to them.
At Middle East Economic Digest, Kevin Baxter's been covering the market for years. So is the consensus that Alba's doing the right thing by ramping up production?
You've got to look at the long-term view of aluminium. And aluminium at the moment, I think it produces roughly 40 million tonnes per year. That's the global production. But each year that actually rises by around about 5%. So that's 2 million tonnes a year of additional supply that needs to be met. You've got to basically build 3 new smelters a year just to meet the rising demand for aluminium.
In the long run, Alba's hoping it'll beat competition not just on price, but also through customer service, and most importantly, consistency. Alba's been making aluminium for more than 40 years. Customers know when they order from its smelters, the product they'll get will have the same quality each and every time they do it. Hopefully, that'll be enough to keep a lid on rivals.
Philip Hampshire reporting from Bahrain there. Dubai's financial crisis will go down in history as the turning point for the region's financial landscape. Big ambition and bigger spending now replaced with a calmer, more cautious approach to development. But have the governments and businesses in this region learned any lessons? Well, that's a question I put to Richard Dean, who wrote a book looking at how different firms navigated the downturn.
The companies that sank lost their discipline in the frenzy. They took on too much debt. They thought the good times would never end. They were hiring and they were expanding and they were speculating wildly because they lost their discipline. The companies that swam, they didn't do that. They had the discipline during the good times to take on some debt and expand, yes, to hire a few more people, yes, but not to get caught up in the frenzy and not to jump on the bandwagon and inflate the bubble, because they could see and they recognize, they have the discipline to know that the business cycle, it has its ups, but it also has its downs, and they recognize that, and it's as simple as that. I mean, you can look at economics and demand shocks and supply shocks and debt equity ratios if you like, but fundamentally it boils down to companies that had enough discipline during the boom times. By and large, they're the ones that survived.
You're talking about the building blocks of business, process and procedure. Is it that simple?
This book could have been written after the 17th century Dutch tulip crisis, the 19th century railroad bubble, the tech bubble, any of the bubbles in history, because the lessons are fundamentally the same. Don't jump on the bandwagon. If you must jump on the bandwagon, whatever you do, don't do it with borrowed money. Recognize that things don't last, booms don't last. There is an up to the business cycle and a down to the business cycle, and recognise that when it stops, there will be a shuddering slowdown in the economy. Now, if you recognise that and plan accordingly, it's fine. You can iron out those smooths, you can iron out those curves and those kinks in the road, but you have to recognise that. But in all honesty, the lessons learned, they're probably, they're nothing new, and if I'm perfectly honest, people won't remember them when the next boom comes along. I'd like to think they will, but I think that's being a little bit naive, because it's human nature, irrational exuberance. That's what happened here this time, and it's going to happen again.
Are businesses in this region vulnerable?
Well, I think there's a specific mentality in Dubai that is both a blessing and a curse for Dubai. 40 years ago, as we know, Dubai was a fishing village, and now it's this shiny, wonderful city. And it got there through this incredible can-do attitude, this fundamental belief in what Dubai is doing. Both the public sector and the private sector bought into it as well. And it was Dubai's greatest asset, but it went a little bit too far. That confidence perhaps became a little bit of arrogance and hubris, and Dubai began to believe its own hype a little bit. So it just sailed too high and sailed a little bit too close to the sun because of that confidence build up over 30, 40 years of success. It's understandable, if you like, in a way, that that confidence did become arrogance to an extent. I think on the whole, though, if we look at Dubai, if we're looking back in 10, 20 years from now, over the history of Dubai over half a century, that overconfidence will have served them better, it will have served them well, it will have done them more good than harm. But right at the moment and over the past 5 years, it just got a little bit too much.
Richard Dean speaking to me earlier. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed our programme. Our time is very nearly up, but before we go, let's see how the region's main markets finished the week. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is middleeastbiz@bbc.co.uk. Now, next week, we're meeting one young Saudi whose ivory design is proving a hit across the Arab world. Until then, from me, Nima Abu Warde, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.